real quick.
Sure.
Go here. I gotta put up my thumbnail and stuff like that. But dude, we are live, and I just want to say thank you so much for coming on insanely short notice. Just a whim, really. I just was like, hey, are you available? Are you doing anything? And that's literally
Yeah.
how it all happened,
I'm happy to join everyone.
dude.
Chat. 7 years. I'll keep going. So
Dude, so this, I've been looking at this past couple of days. There hasn't really been a lot of Ashes streams. There really hasn't been a lot of Ashes videos. It's been very quiet. And this is why I kind of titled this stream The Calm Before the Storm, because I feel like tomorrow, like something's gonna break. Like there's been a dam that's been holding back like a lot of us as CCs, a lot of us as community members. Like, do you feel like that kind of palpable energy, like going into
yeah,
the discords and just talking to people?
yeah. And I had
It's
actually even made a
wild.
comment on about that. Like it just seeming to kind of dip down a little bit. And I think you're right. I think everyone's waiting. Actually, I put a poll up on our Theory Forge YouTube
I saw that. I
today.
I voted.
And the like the lone comment, or I think I haven't checked it in a minute, but the lone comment I saw was basically like, "Oh, forget the Bard. We want to know Alpha 2." Um, and so that's yeah, I think everybody's sort of just chilling until we find out. Although I want
What?
to see the Bard. So
Well, I mean, I guess it's because in my own head, I'm not really about the Alpha 2 date because it's like in my mind, I already know what the date is. You know what I mean? Like, I've been saying for months September, and I've been also saying like probably going to be the end of September. So I'm pretty sure like I basically put out my prediction in my guild in Axiom, and I think that the date is going to be the 24th. I think it's going to be the very last Tuesday of September. That is my personal guess as to when the
interesting.
the date will be, because I think, especially, I think if they're going to want Tuesdays to be like a maintenance day, sort of like World of Warcraft, I think I would kind of put money like it's probably going to be that specific date. And I have nothing to base it off of. I just think it could be that Monday. Hell, it could be the following Monday, which is the 30th. It could be the last
Yeah.
day of the month, which still, qualifies as third quarter. But I mean, if it's like anybody or any company, let's just push it to the limit, right? Push it to the max.
Yeah. No, that's been my thought all along, is the last day of the last month of the quarter.
Yeah,
Give as much time as possible. Um,
absolutely.
you know, coming at the end of July, I don't personally think there's any chance it's August. So
Oh no. It's so funny. A lot of the people in my guild and other guilds, like I remember people still had hope of July. I remember,
yeah,
man, the hope in some people's hearts, man. Like I gotta give it to them. But it's now, of course, those people are like a little disappointed. So I think they're more trying to say early September, maybe late August. I know there's still some people in that camp. I just don't think it's anywhere near even early September, because I know Intrepid wanted to give a lot of people like valid notice as to when,
mhm,
like, and always thought like 2 months, right? Like
yeah,
2 full months to like give people time to like plan, get your PTO or because again, this is also the time too of traveling. It's still the summertime. Like people are still trying to
yeah,
get like,
it's true.
their stuff situated and everything. Hell, I know I've made stuff that I was like, well, my wife was like, well, my wife is going on a trip to Illinois that I'm not going to, because I just wanted to make sure that, because God forbid I do something and then Trip's like, hey, we're gonna do it on that day. That's the day we're gonna
Yeah,
do it on. But no, it's she's leaving in early August, and I was like, nah, I was like, it's not gonna happen that time. I was like, so go ahead and go. Like I'll stay behind or whatever. But me and Richie were talking earlier, dude, and I've been just writing down a bunch of title ideas, like writing down like like what the title of this video is and like how I can execute that video, because I told Richie, dude, me and you're gonna compete, man. I'm gonna pump videos out. Like
Yeah.
after this August 1st, like I'm pumping. Like I'm gonna be making as much videos as possible, because I feel like we're just hitting this time now, right, Phantom, of um it's getting it's just getting so ridiculous. Like, and I mean ridiculous in a very good way, because I have not felt this level of energy in the Ashes community since
Mhm.
God, like UE5. Like that was like the last time I felt this kind of a pool, or this kind of just an energy, coming from people. And again, I think it's not, to me, I don't think it's the date. Knowing the date is kind of irrelevant in my head because it's still so far away. I think
That's
it's
true.
actually getting real to people. Like I think that is more the sentiment that I'm feeling from, or talking to people. It's not just a figment of their imagination now. Like there's people like you, the pre-alpha 2 people, are actually playing the game right now, right? Like it's not just something we're all speculating, or this imaginary game that we've been making content for. You
Mhm.
know what I mean? Like people are actually playing this game. So I think for a lot of people, it's getting real. Like, do you have anything to say about that?
No, I think you're right. 3 years, right? 3 years from Alpha 1 to now. Like, it's been a long time,
Yeah.
and people start sort of questioning things, and, I think once you got to really kinda caravans and you actually saw some interactions with real players outside of the, developers, and then you get to the Node War stream, and people actually start seeing the combat, start seeing the PvP, and I think things start really picking up. And yeah, people are like, oh, this it's becoming this. I feel like a lot of people have sat in this sort of, is it, doomium and copium, right? Like in this middle phase, kind of going back and forth. Is it good? Is it bad? But now it's really starting to swing towards, hey, this is a real thing. It's going to
Right.
happen.
Right.
Although people have to be mindful, it is a beta or an alpha. Sorry, it's going to
Right.
be buggy as hell. But
And Phantom, I
yeah,
was going to ask you. Oh, before I ask you this, I just want to say, Beaver Pirate, thank you so much for the sub, dude. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I truly appreciate the support you give me and the channel and stuff like that. And it's definitely like, I know I've been like almost feeling like primarily a streamer for Ashes of Creation, but I do make content, damn it, and I am going to give you guys content, and I'm talking YouTube content as far as for the month of August. I think a lot of content creators, like I know Nice is going to be releasing a banger video tomorrow. There's gonna be plenty of us streaming tomorrow. I'll be streaming the live stream live on my channel by my lonesome, because I'm not cool enough and invited by the other content creators. But it's okay. I know there's like scheduling and stuff like that, but I'm just excited, dude. Like I think it's just, for me, like I guess for you it's just different, right? Because you're in PI, like you have access to the game, right? So it's probably not the same for you. But just speaking primarily to myself, I feel like it's finally real, because that's the thing that we're talking yesterday in another guild chat that I was in, and I was just telling him like, as a content creator and making content for this game, like I'm actually going to be experiencing these systems very, very, very soon. And when I was looking back, and I was doing this kind of series on my stream of like watching the old like 2017 Intrepid and all of the early live
mhm.
streams and where the combat was, and just looking where the combat is now, it's so radically different. And it feels like, even in an alpha, it feels ready, dude. And it's so wild to even say that.
Mhm.
And I mean ready in the sense of like, if they were to say that this combat is like shipping to like, in a couple of months, like for a live release, like I'd be like, damn, okay, cool. But to think we, in my head, I still think we have 2 or 3 years away from the live launch, and it looks this good now. Like, what's your history like when it comes to testing like any kind of a game? Are you the kind of gamer that likes to test like alphas and betas of like video games?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, all the way
Okay.
back, to date myself, but to EverQuest, World of Warcraft, really all of those, EverQuest 2 all the way through. I've tested quite a bit of stuff. So Um, the games that failed, things like Landmark, Revival, some of these other games as well. So um, yeah, I've enjoyed testing. It's fun. Um, I hope everyone remembers this is testing. Send your bugs. Don't keep a hold of them. Now there might be temptations to not report everything, but please do. But it's exciting. It really is. You mentioning combat. Um,
Mhm.
I think there were two things really that I would think they felt they had to nail for Alpha 2. Now it is an alpha again, it's gonna be buggy, but,
Right.
it's a public, so people are gonna make some perceptions. One is just their server architecture, making sure they can actually handle the players. 'Cause I think that's one of the biggest things when a game goes into early access
Oh,
or
absolutely.
release or whatever, if you're in a queue for 8 hours or if you're just constantly crashing out of the server, I mean, those are things that people just quickly get tired of and
Absolutely.
and immediately oh, this game's terrible, I'm not going to play it. The other is combat. I think everyone, obviously being a PvX game with a huge focus on PvP, they wanted that to feel very good, and I can tell you again from Node Wars it felt very good. So I think their
Yeah.
combat is in a very good place. Their class design is in a very good place.
And
um,
and when you say that, are you saying that as someone who's tested other alpha games and experienced combat in an alpha? Because I think, and this is what I'm trying to, is when I was talking to this guild yesterday in Discord, I don't think a lot of people have truly tested or alpha tested games before. I
mhm,
think they're mistaking alpha for beta, or either sometimes early release. Like early release is such like a broad topic at this point right now that even an early release can be considered an alpha. Some can be considered like a beta. Even some can be considered as like, hey, this is like a preview, like we're launching in 2 weeks or whatever. Like early release is such like a vague like a term, like terminology in gaming.
yep.
But from the people that I've spoken with, and I asked them, I was like, okay, so what have you beta tested or alpha tested? And most of them were just like expansions of like their MMO, right? Like Guild Wars 2, World of Warcraft. And I'm like, well, those really aren't alphas. Like that's not like the
No,
foundational building blocks of still kind of figuring out like how do we want this system to actually work.
no.
Betas are like that's it's so far removed of like what an alpha is and what I think an alpha is trying to accomplish like at the foundational base game level. And for someone like you that's actually alpha tested other MMOs, and again, like I was actually trying to look up like on YouTube, but most of these alphas are under NDA. So it's not like you can
Yep.
go on YouTube right now and look up like Guild Wars 2 alpha footage because it kind of doesn't exist, right? Because it was under NDA. But the people that I've spoken with, like other than yourself, were like, dude, when I played Guild Wars in like Guild Wars 2, not 1, 2, in the alpha stage, it was rough, like
Mhm.
really rough. And I think most people or most testers that have that alpha experience can go in a game like Ashes and either be, in my opinion, impressed or like, wow, this is really refreshing of how like polished it all seems comparatively to the games that I've alpha tested. That is all bare bones. UI is like quite literally just functional. It's not really like colorful. It just works, and most of the stuff doesn't work. Right, like trying to test a system
Yeah.
and it's buggy or something like that. I don't know, what do you have to say about something like that?
Oh, for sure. No, it feels just really good. I mean, it feels like a playable game. I think combat itself. No, this is like the third iteration, right? I would say this is their third game. They haven't released one, but this is really their third game. APOC, Alpha One, Alpha Two, three
Right.
very different games, and each step of the way you've seen combat improve, and really they've I mentioned the two things, combat and networking. Those are the two biggest things that they've really worked on
Hmm.
in all of these stages, right? APOC
Right.
was networking and some combat, Alpha One combat, and I think they've got it into a really good place. The best sort of modern example I can probably give, because I think you're right. Early access is a sort of a bastardized term at this point. Like, who knows
Tell
what
me
it
about it.
means? Um, I think you look at PAX Day. And to me, that's an they say early access. That's an alpha game. Um,
Yeah,
and
very much.
you look at where its combat is, right? Combat
Right.
does not feel good.
No.
They're in their clear early infant stages of combat. It feels bad. PvE, PvP doesn't matter. It just feels bad. That's sort of an alpha state of testing of combat. Ashes is far beyond that. Far beyond that. Their combat has clearly been a focal point of everything. Like I said, no wars just felt good. The initial tests in that the downside wasn't the combat; it was that their servers and stuff were really buggy early. By the time
Right.
we got to recording, it felt really good. It was fun. I'm not a huge PvP person, but I would do that again and again and again.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there are some people that say it looks more playable than some fully released games, at this point. And I think what
Yeah,
I'll say about the combat, this is someone, of course, who has not even touched a single button in the Ashes of Creation video game, but it does look very responsive. And especially when I look at like Keegan's gameplay or Planetdorf's gameplay or even my boy Phantom, in the Node Wars, it looks fairly responsive. And I think that's the thing
mhm,
that I think a lot of us truly, because we're all having our kind of our home MMO in our heads, and we're trying to wonder, does it translate one to one, right? Like I'm wondering as a WoW player, pushing buttons in this game, does it feel like pushing buttons in WoW? Or does it feel like pushing buttons in Final Fantasy 14? Or does it feel like pushing buttons in Guild Wars 2? Or does it feel like pushing buttons in New World? Because all those feel very different from one another. And I think that's where us as MMO players want to really find out. Because for me, as a non New World player, pushing buttons in that game doesn't quite feel as satisfying as to someone like myself. But even though I'm a WoW player, pushing buttons in Guild Wars 2 actually felt really good. So it just depends, right?
yeah. No, I think it felt really good. I mean, action, camera, tap target.
Right.
Yeah, things just are in a really good space. I think where they're really at with combat is more so just fleshing out skills, kind of balancing things.
Mm-hmm.
This paper rock scissors thing that Steven wants to do. I don't think they at all need to go back and rework anything. I guess you could let the masses in,
Wow.
and they could complain, but I really don't think that's going to happen. I think
You
people are
so,
going to feel pretty good.
so do you think combat, and also, by the way, D Jugs, thank you so much for the sub again, dude. Appreciate it, man. Thank you. Thank you. Do you think combat, like, if we were on a scale from 1 to 10, 10 being completely finished, hard, like maybe 0.1% iteration needed, right? So, like, super duper fine tuning. In your personal opinion, where does combat sit in that numeric scale currently?
Oh, that's tricky. Um, I'd say it's above 5, but below a 10. Um,
Okay. That's
the
pretty damn good,
fighter,
in my opinion.
the one that I did not play test the fighter during No Wars, but I will say that's out of all the classes that were available, that's the one that I think the people who did play it felt a little less sure of it, like how it felt. So there's still some work to be done, but there's not going to be any sort of need to go back and rework major portions of this. I mean, it's really in a
Right.
good start, in a good place to keep building. Of course, as the bard comes in, that could change a lot of things too, but we'll see.
Well, I think so. When you say like a not a 10, but maybe like around a 5, when I say combat, are you taking into account like the feel of the combat, the VFX, the sound effects? Like, are you taking the entire package in consideration, or are you more just talking the feel? I just want to be as clear as I can, like as
Just
far
the
as like
basics, the
the
basics of how
basics.
it feels, the pace, something how the animations feel. Does it feel like I'm actually making contact? Do I feel impactful?
Mhm.
What is my ability to defend myself? All of those sorts of things. I will say, in my opinion, things like visual effects, animations. I think you saw on the streams they've shown, like I think, in my opinion, too flashy, and I think that will probably be the feedback they get from quite a lot of these Alpha 2 testers is that they kind of need to
Right.
tone down some of that sort of stuff.
Right.
Um, but just actually feeling like it's meaningful combat. It's in a really good place.
Right. Well, so Dolam has a hot take. He says players found withholding bugs and exploits from devs during Alpha 2 evidence provided should have their accounts banned. So I would say Ashes of Creation's community is very poor at hiding things. They are extraordinarily poor at hiding things. And I've been very clear to people. Like anyone in my chat, if there is a bug or an exploit that you're like, hey, Vlad, you need to try this out and do it on stream, I will. That's the whole reason why I created Vlhadus Gaming, because I want to give feedback. I want to test and make sure that every single bug, every single exploit is noted, videoed, and basically called out so the developers can get it out or get it fixed or whatever the case is. Like, I don't want to be that kind of game or that kind of community where there's like an exploit that, oh, in 2 or 3 years, maybe they'll never find out about it. Like, I just, no, like, and especially in a community like Ashes of Creation, like they can't keep anything secret. Like, come on now. So I think like, how do you feel about that, Phantom?
I mean, no, I agree with what they said. As far as people letting everything out publicly, I don't know. I think some people will. I think some people will hold on to the more valuable ones potentially. We'll see.
Okay. Yeah, give me 1 second. I want to see my. They said
I turned myself up a little bit too, so I don't know if I sound any louder, but.
All right, I just hired you up a little bit more, just in case. Let me see. Let us use exploit bugs and we can report them and not getting banned. Well, no, I mean, of course, like the whole thing about like using an exploit or making sure there is a bug or an exploit there, like you're not going to get banned for doing it. Now, if there's something like when it comes to like griefing people with a bug and you're doing it knowing it's going to happen for like funsies, they may give you like a warning, but if you keep doing it, you might be banned for the day or something like that, but just don't do it, right? Like, again, you're just documenting these things for the alpha. And so, Phantom, I was going to ask you, like, whenever you have tested your games, were you required to give like feedback to the company? Because I've talked to many people that said, I'm really excited to play Alpha 2, but I'm actually not going to leave anything. Like, I'm not going to leave any kind of feedback, or I'm not going to go to the forums and give my opinions or thoughts or whatever, because there's still some people that believe that they're not going to hear it, or, you know, I'm just going to do stuff in the game. Do you think even that is still viable, or do you think that is the wrong approach, or like, how do you feel about something like that?
I mean, it's definitely testing, right? So I don't know that I would use the word playing. Actually, one of the best comments that I've seen on a video was the notion of taking vacation for the start of Alpha 2 is probably not the best approach because it's going to be down so much, which actually made sense, like not being able to get in the servers. You know, I think that those people still add value, right? So, you know, when we know wars is what, 70 people. So if you start putting thousands of people on a server, maybe only like 10% actually give you written feedback, but the rest are at least there giving you server feedback, like what, you know, how's the server, we're handling things, where are issues popping up, you know, all of their, what do they call it? That the eye, I forget what that's called, but the tool
Eye of
they
Shoal.
created. Yes. You know, so I think they're still going to get pretty valuable data.
Right.
But they do offer, and I assume they will, you know, we would have feedback sessions with them, you know, both, well, I don't know that they'll do in-person feedback sessions with 100,000 people, but, you know, I think they will at least offer your ability to do some reports and things like that. So,
I mean, I think I think there is still, and this is the thing I've said, is like, I think there is still stuff, even if you're never going to go to the forums or go anywhere to leave any sort of your own personal feedback, playing the game is still going to provide intrepid data. And data is very critical. It's very important to the overall flow. People were mentioning dupes, like anything, like any kind of a bug, exploit, or dupe. Like, if we can replicate it, if we can call it out, that's going to be in my report. I'm going to be leaving as much of a detailed report as I can, video essays, like regarding all of the exploits, all of the bugs, because that's just something I want to do. Because I also want to be able to make a video to show people, like, hey, these are all the things that they've fixed. You know what I mean? Like, and I know they could easily just come out with like a patch note or whatever that says, hey, we fixed like 1,000+ bugs or whatever. And I think sometimes when we read that as like MMO players, we're like, but did they? Because the game still feels so buggy. The game, but they didn't fix this one bug that I care about or that belongs to my class, or you know what I mean, something like that. Like the thing is that MMOs are just such large projects, and they encompass so many different systems and so many different things, and we all know how far encompassing and how intertwined these systems are in Ashes of Creation.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just something that I think people need to kind of chill, calm. You know what I mean? Because it is going to be like you said. Like for me, I'm not really taking I actually was going to take a vacation, but now I'm on permanent vacation until I get a job for Alpha 2. But I'm going to be making this time to, make the content I want to make, say the things that I want to say, and really provide that kind of critical feedback to Intrepid. Because, man, I've never been so excited to play a system that I've never really cared for, which is the profession system. Like I've never been a profession system guy in any MMO. It's like the least played system that I just ever done. And I am actually really excited to do this in Ashes because the economy is just going to be so important to the overall game, which is why the whole duping question, right? Because if we don't find these dupes, if we don't find these kind of exploits, that's just going to negatively impact the economy come launch day. And that's the worst situation we could ever be in. I mean, have we not beat the new world horse enough? Like we got to get these things done and out. And I know Phantom, I think you agree with me when it comes to like how long this particular test is, right? It's going to be quite long. Like we can all conjecturally agree, 1 year to 3 years, 3 years being the max. I was watching your show on Sunday, and you were basically kind of mentioning like 1.5 to 2, 3 years. 3 years being like very much like oh shit, there was some stuff that we found that required a little bit more time. But I think 1.5 to 2 years is a feasible, especially right now, not having a whole Eastern continent that we haven't even seen yet, and much less the content that needs to facilitate that content as well. I think it's par for the course, 1.5, 2 years. And that's back and forth feedback, right? That's systems that we can, we as the community say, hey, this system needs work. Intrepid says, we got you, fam. They go and work that system. Are like, oh, okay, it's better now. That all takes time, right?
Yeah. No, I think, 2 to 3 years probably. I think that makes sense. This is just such a complex game. I see someone says 6 years in chat. I will point out, the last time we had Steven on Theory Forge, Diggs, it was a joke, but he said released by 2030, right? And Steven did not answer that question. So could happen. No. There's just a lot, it's and again, this is I think their sort of third version, right? So there's just a lot to go through, and they'll add things over time, and we hopefully will get a list soon of kind of what we can expect for Alpha 2. I think once that comes out, people will start to get a much better idea of kind of timeframes, because they'll get to see what's in, what's out. I will say, hopefully, as systems get put into place and work, and a lot of it just ends up becoming content, hopefully that gets easier to put in place a little bit quicker. But
right.
like I said, it's I made a video on this. It's a real alpha, so just be prepared.
And again, I was trying to explain this to one of my friends, like and he says he gets it, but I told him, I was like, dude, I don't think you do, because you keep asking me questions that keep telling me you don't get it, like you don't understand how big and massive this game truly is. And it's like, you say you've seen the wiki. I'm like, do you not see how many systems are there? Do you not see how in depth these systems are? Do you not see, just in the profession system, like I've talked to people that have done professions in games, like that's all they do. And they're like, dude, if this profession system is going to be like Star Wars Galaxies, people have told me that this is going to be Star Wars Galaxies on crack. And I don't know if that's a fair statement. I've never seen, we haven't really even seen. Now, I think those people are kind of, because they're such passionate economists, and because they've seen how in-depth other systems are, so they're only extrapolating that as to how expansive and how crazy the professions are going to be. It kind of makes sense, you know what I mean, that these professions are going to actually be very much in depth, very much customizable. And because the fact that it's going to be where every class can wear any kind of armor and wield any kind of weapon, that's a lot to basically account for, right?
Yeah.
PvE, PvP, like we have like, single target AoE, like there's a lot, dude. And that's just one system with like what, 21 professions.
Yeah.
It's just wild.
I mean, yeah. No, you have to, I mean, really step back and look at what have we seen in showcases and what have we not seen, right? And that should give perspective theoretically of where things are. So, you economy, like having to test that. I mean and that's not just buying and trading, but how do
Right.
caravans work? How to transport of goods? All of these things. How resource gathering is involved in that as well. Like they're going to have to fine tune the whole scarcity model and over harvesting and things like that. Professions that's as you mentioned super complex. I mean, when you look at some of the skill trees that we've seen, like it gets very narrow and
Mm-hmm.
sort of what people can do. We've not seen augments as a stream yet. That's a big thing. We've seen some nodes, but we've really not seen the full.
The
They've not
scope.
showcased the full scope of nodes, which is, in my opinion, the biggest part of Ashes of Creation.
Absolutely.
Um, so there's a lot here we've not seen. Um, Even the narrative side, like how, along with nodes comes story changes and story arcs.
Right.
And we've seen some of it. Now I get that. Steven wants to hold a lot back to not spoil. And I get that. But these are just even that system. Think about how the narrative system works within the context of nodes, rising and falling. I
Right.
mean, you can prepare entire stories that never get seen on a server because the server just didn't happen to go down that path. Like
Yep.
there's a lot of super interesting, complex things that we've just not really seen yet.
Yep.
And so when you take that all into account, I think you really have to get some perspective of where we're at. Even with networking, they've had their server meshing in. They're still working on dynamic. That from what they last told us, that was not yet in. They hope to have it in for Alpha 2. But
Right.
so there's a lot of complexities that we still have to help them work through. So
I think the two biggest things in my head that they need to get as right as possible before the day of Alpha 2 launch is the server meshing, get all the data you can, test the hell out of it, get all the pre Alpha 2 people in, break it over and over, figure out where those problems lie, figure out where those barriers need to be, figure out the gridding part of it. Because if Intrepid can truly get that particular system working in a way that's not just feasible, but just like, oh my God, it's working way more than intended, that's going to alleviate queue times. And then basically the second major thing is the combat. I would say combat / classes. Put in as many of the abilities, as smooth out as much of the combat animations, the VFX, the sounds, whatever you got to do to just make the combat as visceral and as like when you hit a button and you hit something, it just sounds satisfying. It feels good. It looks good, because I can guarantee you if those two things are as solid as can be and you see a bug there or like a glitch here or the profession UI, goes up in a weird wonky way, it doesn't matter, because you remembered, shit, when I logged in day one, I got into like an hour and a half queue, which was freaking amazing. When I logged in, I have not been kicked out of the server. I have not been rubber banded. And my character, and as far as the animations and the combat, has been super solid. So if those two things are solid, in my head, you can have all the bugs in the world regarding all the other systems, and I don't think people would care. I don't think the complaining
yeah,
would be as terrible.
no, I 100% agree with that. Yeah, servers, making sure people can actually log on, stay on, and then
Yeah.
as a PVX game, 100%. Obviously, I think some of the first things anybody's going to start to do when they get to test Alpha 2 is start trying to kill each other. And so you want to make sure it feels good, at least. I mean, dying isn't going to feel good, but
No,
at
for sure.
least as you're fighting or defending yourself, that you actually felt like the combat was in a positive space. So, again, I can only really speak to Node Wars, and I will say my experiences in Node Wars, I think those two things are in pretty good spots. So,
So
and if there's server issues, the speed of which they improved Node Wars from test 1 to 6 was actually honestly impressive, how quickly it improved their server backend for us. So I would expect that, on Alpha 2 release as well.
I'm so sorry, I'm not changing the subject, but just want to say, Saint Solace 95, thank you so much for the follow. That was like 13 minutes ago, and I did not see it at all. I apologize. Just right now, I'm just captivated by my boy Fantmx and his amazing opinion so far. But no, like I think when it comes to the launch of Alpha 2, because I've asked this question, I said, what would sour your opinion on the Alpha 2? And the two things that I got was if combat didn't feel good, and if I was stuck in a queue all day. Those were like the two things that would sour people's opinions. So that's the thing I really want to hammer to Intrepid is like, yes, I know if you're working, like my boy Corey, right? Quartarian Slurp, he's in the professions team. I'm sure he wants the UI. I'm sure he wants all the recipes to work as intended or whatever. But I would say that the two teams is going to be the server team and the combat team / class team. I think those two teams have their work cut out for them before the launch, because I'm telling you, like, I haven't really heard anyone say anything too differently as far as like what would sour their opinion. I mean, most of the time I think it's queue times are just, it's such, when you're like, when you have a product, right, especially as rare as an MMO launch is, queue times are kind of par for the course. Like you're going to be in a queue in some kind of way, shape, or form. It really also depends on how many servers they actually want to roll out for Alpha 2. Just quick question, like how many servers do you think that Intrepid's going to give us? Like if they're trying to facilitate maybe 200,000 people.
Yeah.
How many servers
that is
do you
a great question.
I mean, I don't know, but I would assume probably more than 20. Like at least.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the numbers, although they'll also tell you, and I think they've talked about this.
Yes, realms. Thank you.
If they have 100,000, I think they've talked about like peak concurrency. They would expect to be what, like 40,000 out of something like that. So yeah, I don't think they get crazy in the number. They obviously want to be able to facilitate most people getting in, but I don't know that it'll be super high. This is one thing. Stephen was asked this question, I think last stream, about queues and kind of what they would do. And his response was that he would prefer queues. Like he actually doesn't mind having server queues, that people are used to it. I kind of disagree a little bit. I mean, I understand not wanting to blow through a lot of money during Alpha 2. But I think based off what he said, I don't think we should expect that everyone's going to be able to get in right away. Like there will be probably some prolonged queues, which we'll see. I disagree a little bit. I also think this is kind of the time to work out server merges, because I know one thing they don't want to have to probably do if they can avoid it is after releases have to merge servers, because that obviously will get super messy. Very messy. How do you do nodes? Who gets what? And I understand that, but I also think you have to have a plan for that, because historically, even the best MMOs, shrink and grow and shrink and grow. So there needs to be some sort of plan. And I think Alpha 2 is the best place to test that. But
when I've talked about the whole server merging debate, there is not a win-win situation. There just isn't. There is, like, every situation is going to be bad for us, the players, in some way, shape, or form. And I'm telling you, like, I've heard so many different arguments. It's like, well, if you do this, it's like, well, it's still bad for this subset of people, right? And I think it's a matter of, like, what is the least bad scenario? Because there's no good scenario when it comes to a server merge. There just isn't. So, no. But I think they need to happen quickly as possible. Because if you don't do them quickly enough and they meander and they grow and they get more attached to their server, the worse it's going to get, right? It's like pulling off a Band-Aid. You just got to rip it off. Like you can't linger on it. You know what I mean? So, and I think it just feels bad where certain servers, if they have like a population count of 1,500, right? That's definitely not enough for them to experience hashes in a way that's meant to be played. Right. So if you were to take them on to like maybe, and I think that's going to be the thing too, of like, what other server are you going to get them to? Because I hope Intrepid has the mentality of seeing where certain peak concurrences and being like, hey, this has like anywhere between like 65 to like 8,000 at some point. So if we get this server and put it in that server, it'll make it like almost like a full server at that point, right? I think they got to be very critical, because it's going to really suck whenever you go to one server that you server merged with, and then that server also is going to merge with another server, and you're on this daisy chain of merges, basically, right? So you got it. I think Intrepid has to be very critically mindful as to how many are you gonna do? You know what I mean? Because it's gonna happen. Like you think it's not gonna happen. It's definitely gonna happen.
Yeah. I think there's two I would like two different ways as it comes to mind with server merges that I think would be fun and kind of work.
Okay.
One is just combining two and just resetting everything. No one gets anything. You
Both
keep
sides.
your inventories. You keep your inventories. You keep kind of the material things that you have, but the nodes, I should specify, the nodes reset, and you just let people go at it. You can call it a cataclysm. You can introduce some sort of world event that the world, some sort of story arc. I don't know, something that starts to make a little bit of sense. The other, I think, would be interesting too, since this is a PvX game, is do you take sort of the top 5 guilds from each server and you do some sort of realm versus realm, put them together, and kind of winner takes all. And the winner of that battle between the servers actually gets to keep the server structure, and the other people just sort of get put into it. I don't know. Those are two interesting ways I would think about it, as a way to try to keep things fair, but also be kind of fun to see happen.
I mean, the latter would be very interesting to see, because I mean, you're literally what are the stakes, man? The stakes are literally server dominance. That's a pretty big stake right there, man.
I mean, that's crazy. You just take all the top metropolises and do a realm versus realm, and that would be fun to watch. That actually, I think would be interesting to watch as a stream event. But but I'm also I have this also crazy mind where I just, even outside of server merges, I would love to see occasional just like chaotic eruptions on servers. Realms. Where everything just goes to hell. I think that would be fun to see too, but most people would disagree with me on that.
So we talked earlier about like how many systems, and I know the Bard is tomorrow. Like I don't know. I'm sure you talked about the Bard yesterday in your stream. Like, I don't know if you want to talk about the Bard at all, but before we talk about it, like, what system are you like excited for that you haven't even got to play or got to experience or want to experience? And we were talking about earlier, like just how many systems we haven't even seen, you know what I mean? One being the naval system. The naval system is still that thing that people desperately want to see. And I think a lot of the planet side people, like, guys, like I don't think Intrepid is going to try to do a planet side 1-to-1. And I think what in my mind, I think they're trying to do what ArcAge did, but better. I think that is a more fairer comparison as to like the kind of naval battles or the kind of naval gameplay you're going to get. Because I think if you're a Sea of Thieves person, like, I'm sorry, like, it's just not going to be in a game like Ashes. Like, that's too much, But like, what system are you looking forward to, Phantom?
I have to be careful on how I answer this. I will say during Node Wars, I'm a crafter at heart.
Okay.
I have always dreamt, and I will hold this to Steven all the time. I think the second time we interviewed him, I asked him about freeholds and having a farm. And that's how I've always sort of envisioned what I would do with Envera, but I'm not so sure that's going to happen now. But anyways, I do want to, I don't know about freeholds anymore, but
oh no,
I did not get to test crafting during Node Wars. That is something I would love to really get into, is just the harvesting, processing, crafting component that was not there during Node Wars. So
anything specific in crafting? Because I know it's pretty broad with like the gathering, processing, and crafting, but are you more of a gatherer? Are you interested in the processing side of things? Are you wanting to be a crafter? I know there's surprisingly a lot of people that really want arcane or love arcane engineering, and I'm like, dude, I don't even know what arcane
Mhm.
engineering is.
Yeah.
Like, we don't like, we assume it's like maybe crafting like magical items of some sort, but like, dude, we could like Corey could be like listening to like, ha, ha, they think that's what it is. Funny, like we don't know. Like, I don't
Yeah.
know.
I mean, really, literally, if like have just wanted to have a farm, have crops, animal husbandry, it's kind of my thing. So starting to figure out the depths of soil and close proximity to water or not, what crops grow here, climate, all of these sorts of things. It's kind of where I'll see myself. I'm not going to be. I've never been one to do like armor smithing, weapon smithing, and stuff like that. Of course, testing. I mean, I'll test anything at this point. If they want me to go in and test metalworking, okay, I'll do that. Um, you know,
I'm gonna test everything. Like, I actually, I'm really fond to the lumberjacking and mining. I think that's probably going to end up being my two main professions unless I play test, and animal husbandry is just like, oh, because again, like there's going to be so many things that I've never experienced, right? When it comes to ashes, as far as like certain gameplay loops or just, and I could be like, oh my God, I thought it was going to be lumberjacking and mining. And then I did, you know, metalworking and animal husbandry. And I'm like, those two are just so much fun. And they have a lot of really interesting recipes. And I just never, and I'm looking forward to that feeling, man. Like I haven't,
mhm.
the fact of doing brand new things and things that I've just never experienced just seems like, God, it's like, I'm so excited for that because, as
Yeah,
MMO players, I think most of us have done like everything under the sun. There's like nothing new for us. And someone said it in chat, like for me, and if you've been watching me for any kind of span of time, I'm excited for the augment system. I've been making so many videos
hmm
about it. I've been talking about it for I don't know how long. The 64 class system has always been a thing that I've always been worried about. I really want it to succeed, right? And it all hinges on this augment system being as defined and as customizable as possible, especially when it comes to the two main archetypes in my head, which is the tank and cleric. Those two archetypes are so critical to making or breaking the entire system because tanks and healers, I mean, they're pivotal. Like they're the crux
yeah,
of everything. Like you need healers, you need tanks, but you also need variety.
yeah.
That's the other thing. You need variety.
No, I agree, and I saw that in chat. Yeah, I think that's also a big part that we need to help them flesh out, and I agree for the same
Absolutely.
reasons. Actually, as we get to see the Bard tomorrow, I'm almost more excited about the possibilities of Bard as a secondary um, to other classes than just primary Bard. And so,
Really?
well, just the support nature, right? It's the only support class. So,
Okay.
I hope it's not a generic. I hope it doesn't feel the same across everything. Um, or even secondaries to it. I would like to see a wide range of ways to play it. Um,
Do you Can I ask
so,
you a question real quick? I'm so sorry.
mm,
When it comes to the bard, I've heard people say this. What if I don't want to play a bard in a support way? I want to play bard in a DPS way. Like as someone who's been, is very much a cleric. Like do you think that could be a viable way to play bard where,
sure,
you know,
sure,
it'll be
yeah.
interesting.
I think you could turn anything into DPS. I don't know that you would expect to be like the same DPS as like a ranger or something, but I think you can definitely spec things because again, as the cleric, when I did what I call the battle priest, like that was just with some skill selections and a mace rather than a sort of a normal weapon and a shield.
Right.
Um, you I didn't have augments, didn't have really the whole skill trees, didn't have weapon trees, didn't have enchants, didn't have player made armor. Like these were all kind of generic placeholder stuff. And I did okay. I wasn't, going to compete with some of the other people that are primary DPS, but I mean I did okay. And then when you added in the healing, it actually felt very useful. But yeah, I think you
Damn.
could do that with the bard too. When you start thinking every class can use every weapon, and we've really not seen weapon trees yet, so that's going to influence your ability how every class can wear any armor. So all this is going to add up to where you should be able to customize things pretty well. I don't know. Maybe you can get. I've not been able to really inspect this battle priest too much in depth. So I don't know. Maybe you can get more out of it. Maybe you can get more out of the bard as well. I guess we first need to just see
Yeah.
kind of what their skills are. Um,
Well, we've seen a couple
so
of the weapon trees, right? We've seen like the bow, we've seen the wand when it comes to and I also think we've seen the sword, the great sword. We've seen that as well. But there's so many trees. There's so many different ways as to how these trees are all going to function. I mean, hell, I just learned, because of course when you level in Ashes of Creation, you are awarded or earned a talent point, right? I thought you were going to have to put a talent point like from your leveling into weapons. But now we know weapons are going to level kind of on their own. They're going to have their own leveling bar,
mhm.
their own kind of system to like upgrade and everything like that. I also learned when it comes to augments, right? I was looking at augments earlier that, because I thought your talent point, because they're finite, you're only going to get 50 of them, right? Because there's going to be 50 levels. That you had to kind of pick and choose, right? The whole risk and reward, right? That screams all over Ashes of
Mhm.
Creation. That you were going to have to put that talent point in certain trees. And because you have a finite amount of them, you're not going to be able to really get everything you want. Like if you're putting a lot of stuff into the utility tree, that means you're not really getting a lot of skills or enhancements of skills or even augments. And if you're putting more points into like the weapon stuff, then of course, same kind of thing happens. But now we know that the weapons are going to kind of level on their own. So that'll be interesting, like from that aspect. Augments, whenever you hit level 25, augments don't require a talent point. That's interesting. I saw that on the wiki.
Mhm.
I thought that's kind of interesting because I thought people were going to have to either select if they want to augment an ability with a talent point or choose to keep the base fighter ability, right? I thought that was going to be like that weighted choice, right? Do I want more abilities? Do I want to augment these abilities? Or do I want, more customized augmented abilities, right? Like, but apparently, like, it seems like the choices are getting narrower and narrower, not as broad as I thought. So I don't know if certain philosophies might change during the Alpha 2, if maybe they're thinking, well, we thought that this would actually be the best course of action for the weapon system or the best course of action when it comes to augments. But actually listening to y'all's feedback, like, having certain more risk versus reward kind of thing may be more applicable. I don't know. I'm just kind of talking out of my ass here. I'm just trying to give
Yeah,
to you something what I'm seeing from outside the looking glass and
yeah,
seeing where that kind of choice lies when it comes to those talent trees.
yeah. No, yeah, I agree. Now, I will say, now we were only what, level 15.
15. Yeah.
Um, I had to make choices, and that was impactful. Like his skills, I had to not choose some things that were helpful in order to get the things that I was going for. So, even if it ends up just being skill trees, I think you're going to see that there are meaningful choices you're going to have to make depending on what you want to do.
Yeah.
But no, I see, yeah, your point, or maybe even turning augments into where, rather than skill points, you only get 3, and maybe there's 10 available, so you then have to go pick which of the, I don't know, I'm just throwing that out there. I don't know anything extra, but
Mm-hmm.
so that you have to pick a certain, you only have such a number of augments you can even use.
Mm-hmm.
But so I think you're going to see a lot of it. It's hard to gauge. I know he said, didn't he? What was the armor and weapon? I'm trying to go back in my head. I thought they did try to split up percentage wise, sort of what came from player, what came from armors and weapons. But
I think it's,
um,
I can look it up. I think it's like 50%.
yeah. But so I think,
Uh,
even if you have sort of reduced choice or risk versus reward kind of thing with augments and sort of the weapon leveling process,
mm-hmm.
you're still going to have a lot of access to just unique builds based off all of the secondaries, weapons, armor. Um, I think it's going to be a fun experience. I think for me, I dislike the idea of a global meta, and I'm sure that will come about. I'm sure there will be this attempt to sort of get to a meta, but I think when you look at everything, how they all interact, um, we'll get a lot of fun flavor builds. So,
Well, it's like I told people, like if you want to be, there is going to be a meta Phantom. Like we're not going to escape that.
mhm.
However, I think because of how multifaceted this game particularly is, meta in what is going to be the question. Because if you are a PvP player, then you might be meta in certain PvP encounters. But then what kind of PvP encounters? Against what classes? Again, this is a rock, paper, scissors approach, right? So do you want to be more dominant against your weakness or against your strength? Do you want to be kind of a jack of all trades balanced approach for PvP? But maybe that structure doesn't quite work that well in PvE, right? I think for I think what people don't want is there to be this universal, like, oh,
Mhm.
this build for this class is good for PvP, it's good for PvE, it's good for single target, it's good for, AoE. It's a all arounder. Like it's the best thing you can do. I think that's what people don't want. But I really don't mind if you're specializing in a meta against a specific thing and only that thing. And then around every other facet of the content, you aren't a meta in, like you're actually kind of weak in certain aspects in other contents or other bits of systems or whatever. That to me is, I think, the right approach in that aspect, because you're trying to be good in a certain aspect. And I think if you're trying to gather all the data, or you're watching the guides, or you're numerically building it out yourself, I think that's totally fine if you're trying to get an edge like that. I think we all are as MMO players. But I think when it comes to other MMOs, specifically World of Warcraft, like we're always looking to find like, oh, can this talent setup or this way I'm shaping my character just be good in everything? Like I am the single target king, I'm an AoE king, I can do PvP and PvE like this. Like that's what I think gets really boring, because then you're just like this cookie cutter meta build that just never changes, and it gets boring. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's what I don't want personally.
Yeah. I think hopefully they do things kind of how you said, that there is no one global meta, and I think that's what you'll see. You're going to have your PvP builds, you're going to have your PvE builds. It'll be interesting to see group makeup, like what is the optimal group makeup. I'm sure that will change based off your goals. Open world bosses versus maybe instance raid bosses. You might bring different people. Um, so it'll be fun to find all this out. And I'm sure that will start day one of Alpha 2. So,
Well, and Roar said it. I mean, he said it very well, actually. He says if you do not have a meta, then that means you have perfect balance. Outside of rock paper scissors balance, if there is no optimal way to do things, then everyone is exactly the same. Is that what we want? I've always said this. People always scream, "Oh, I want everything to be perfectly balanced." We don't. Like there's always some unfit or like unbalanced way things end up happening, and people are fine with it at the end of the day. Now it's usually like complete overarching like differences where there's like a 10 to 15% discrepancy on a certain class or a build that's just so ridiculous. But if this class has like a 3% advantage compared to you that don't have the 3% advantage, like it's not going to kill you. And again, just by having certain hot fixes or certain patch, updates, whatever from the developer, that meta can quickly shift to like something else or to some other class or to some other ability or whatever. But I personally, like, I'm never advocating for a perfectly balanced game. Like I just don't want glaring, like you played Alpha 1, right, Phantom? Remember the wand? You remember the wand,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I don't want the wand. Like that's what you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like that's the stuff that I don't want, because that's when everything basically becomes the same, and it just like, okay, then everyone's using the wand because it's so overpowered, and then it's just not fun. You know what I mean? Like that's what
Yeah.
I'm saying. Like you need differences. You need these things to feel good, numerically feel good as well, but you just don't want to have this outlier, and I think it's that outlier approach that I think most people can agree we don't want this outlier. Like again, if you go look at Final Fantasy 14, Final Fantasy 14 is not balanced. However, you go look at their charts, like for like, let's say PvE raids, they look pretty even. Like the line, like if you go
Mhm.
down the classes, it's pretty good. Mind you, you cannot customize your class at all. There is no talent system. There are no trinkets in Final Fantasy 14, and yet that is probably the closest we can ever get to actually being balanced. In a game, any game where you have talent trees, you have customization of abilities, you just have to face facts that stuff is not going to be balanced. Like, and I think being unbalanced is okay. So that's what I'll
Yeah,
say about
and
that.
I'm not, yeah, and I'm not arguing that everything should be perfectly balanced, but I think it should be different based off your intent, what you're doing, where you're going. There should be multiple peaks. Inevitably, people are going to try to find a way to optimize the best they can, the fastest they can. But um, I hope the design is such that if I choose to come in with a maybe not maximally optimized character, that I can still do the content. It might be harder, and it should be harder, but that I still, I'm not so gimped to the part where otherwise it's like, well, why have this class? Why have this
Right,
combination of 64? So and that's what I say by that. Like there should still
right,
be opportunity to play it any way you want. Might be harder, but like you said, Bard
right,
DPS. I'm sure it'll be possible. It's probably
right,
going to be hard to master,
right.
um, but I'm sure it'll be possible. So
So, like, okay, going on the Bard. Perfect segue, by the way, Phantom. Thank you. The Bard class support has not been truly in our day and age of MMOs lately. Like, I mean, we have Lost Ark that has the Bard and Paladin class. Like, it's like support. We have Terraceland, which I know you were playing Terraceland earlier, that has a Bard as well. Hell, even World of Warcraft now has the Augmentation Evoker, which is, I guess you can call it like a support class or a support spec, I would say, for World of Warcraft. Like, how do you feel about the absence and almost like hopefully like a return for support classes?
yeah. Well, I miss them. They are not here. It's
Mm,
interesting once you got to sort of World of Warcraft, some of the very early games. You think back to EverQuest, even EverQuest 2 with enchanters. You had specific roles. They mattered. Um, Mesmerizing targets, giving buffs, giving debuffs, and it was an important role. Like you didn't, you
absolutely.
actually contributed. Like you're in many ways, your group's success was dependent on your ability just to keep their buffs up, keep the debuffs up on whatever you were killing. And that all kind of has gone away, I think, to this idea of everyone doing everything. Well, even crowd control. You think back to like early World of Warcraft, crowd control mattered, but as you sort
Oh,
of
definitely.
advanced,
CC was
like
huge.
even that has sort of gone away. So bringing back the Bard, my hope, I don't think this will happen, but and if Fupa was on here, I think he'd agree with me, is to bring back the sort of OG Bard, which was this idea of tune twisting and mixing different songs together so that you could sort of, depending on the goal, either provide armor to your colleagues or hit points or mana regeneration, and at the same time doing either damage to targets or reducing their strength or whatever.
Right.
um, I hope they bring that back. I don't know, we'll see. That was my question in the forums, is will tune twisting be a thing? But um, so even if they don't have tune twisting, it's still that idea that your primary role is support, buffs, debuffs. Like that is why you are there. You maybe throw in some heals, you maybe throw in some DPS, but that's not your primary function,
Right.
and that is absent.
Yeah. As someone who's never really played a support, hell, I remember, what was it in Shadowlands? One of my buddies was playing a Windwalker monk, and Windwalker monks, especially in Castle and Athria, weren't the best at all. They were actually like kind of very low in the charts. And my Windwalker monk would crank, and he would always say, "It's like, bro, anyone under me, you have no excuse," because it's like I'm playing a spec that's like at the bottom, and what are you guys doing?
Mhm.
And I've always told people, like, it doesn't matter what the meta is, because just because you're playing the meta build doesn't guarantee you're going to do top damage. Your skill still has to translate. And not to be mean, but most people's skill does not translate to the meta build. You know what I mean? It just doesn't. Like, hell, I remember with Havoc Demon Hunters when Momentum was the build, and that was like the best DPS. It was the meta to do. Hardly anybody can pull off Momentum build as a Havoc Demon Hunter. And so, again, like, just because there is a 0.1% that can do it doesn't mean that it is for you. And I've always said this, play what you want to freaking play. Because hell, like, especially when it came to WoW, people looked at WoW logs, and I'm sorry I'm going off a whole different tangent. I will swing it back to Bard in just a second. But people were in chat were talking about this, and dude, I played a survival hunter in Blackrock Foundry back when Beastmaster at that time was the king. Everybody was playing Beastmaster. It was the top dog. Survival was definitely not. And I would beat out Beastmaster hunters. And it's all about like your comfortability in the spec. It's all about the comfortability in knowing your cooldowns, knowing your abilities and stuff like that. I loved it because I played it for so long. Like I stuck to survival all the way until Blackrock Foundry. And then I finally started experimenting with marksman when it came to the final raid tier of Warlords of Draenor. But anyway, all that being said, when it comes to support, there's also people too, especially when there's a DPS meter, that feel like, oh, I'm playing a Bard or I'm playing this support class and my numbers are at the very far bottom. You have to also take into account, and this is something that they were trying to get right with the augmentation evoker, because micro buffs and the things you do that the other classes or the other specs don't do usually did not account for the DPS. But then whenever recount or details finally implemented, like, hey, your micro buffs and all of that damage that accumulated from the raid then got added to your damage, you saw everybody was like, all the augmentation evokers were doing like top damage. Because again, if you are doing your rotation like as well as you can, as well as executing all of the micro buffs for your melees, for your tanks, for your healers, for your ranged, I'm telling you, support classes can be so devastatingly amazing. Like they can be brutal, like, and do a lot of damage and provide hell. Like people in Lost Ark were saying a good Bard or a good Paladin can make it seem like you have like 2 extra people in your raid. Like that's how critical they are. You know what I mean? And so when you talk about like the days of old, right? Like EverQuest, or even like, for some reason, Lord of the Rings Online, like the minstrel on that is like somehow goated. A lot of people like talking about that particular class too. Again, I've never played those games, so I can't really talk from any kind of experience, but the stories that I've heard and like how a good Bard, quote unquote, just can set raids apart, right? Like a good player, like if you are good with support, like you're just, holy crap. Like you can elevate the raid to this like next level. So like how do you, like, what are you wanting from the Bard when it comes to that support? Because I've also heard this other term and I don't quite understand it. And again, this is from someone who's not played a Bard. They're like, oh, I don't want Bards to just be mana bots or buff bots, and that's all their function. But isn't that what a support is? Like, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, please.
Part of it, sure.
Okay.
Part of it. So, you know, thinking back to some of these original classes, yes, you could certainly do a song to heal that would provide some sort of dot over time while the song was going. You could do the same for mana regen. And I think that will be a part of this, especially with sort of the way we experience mana regen and resource in Node Wars. I think the Bard will help with a lot of that. But no, that's not the only thing. There's a lot more to this, right? So you look at some, and there's great examples out there. If you just go through the EQ spell list for Bards, like
right,
that's existed 25 years. If you want to look at some interesting ideas, I mean, you can lower armor class, you can increase strength, you can change total stamina. Like you can do a lot of different stuff that you're not just a mana regen and health regen. Charm, you know, you could do songs that provide CC and charm monsters around you. There's a lot of possibilities. I think they're going to go that way. I don't think it's going to be super narrow in scope. I think we're going to probably see a lot of different skills that will make people happy, hopefully.
Right.
but there's just a lot out there, a lot more than. I mean, you could have bards that. I mean, you could go a lot of different ways with it. Stick them in a group that's harvesting and increase the spirit of your harvesters. They harvest faster. They get more resources. There's just a lot of different ways to make the bard valuable. But I think as to what you were just saying, part of why I think a lot of that has gone away is that there's no way to account for that success. So you get in games that have
Mm,
DPS meters. It's exactly like you say. Like I think in World of Warcraft, a lot of times even the priest is expected to do some sort of DPS.
oh yeah.
Um, and if they have none, then there's a question as to why. And a true support class looking at like a DPS meter is going to look like crap. And so I think that's a lot of why things have sort of fallen the way they have. But if it's a well done class, it really should feel like they make everything just completely different. That you going into a raid with a bard, you're going to be successful. Without, you won't. I also think though having 8-person groups will help some of the concerns about having a support class that doesn't do DPS. If you have 7 other people that are sort of producing that. But again, if it'll be hard, it'll be interesting. Actually, I'm sitting here talking about this. It'll be interesting to see how big guilds and sort of the meta does react to this, especially if we don't have DPS meters or other ways to actually see the effect.
Right.
So it's almost going to be like something that we have to feel. So it'll be interesting to see how that ends up. But there's a whole lot you can do with the bard class.
Do you, do you think bards should have a mind control mechanic at a pretty high cooldown? Like let's take a 3-minute cooldown. So you can only do it once and you can mind control for like maybe 8 seconds or something like that. Like I think of mind control when it comes to the priest in WoW and just like Arathi Basin where you can just mind control someone off of a cliff and just jump them to their death. Like, do you think that should exist in a game like Ashes?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to go through traditional bard classes, they had their form of CC and crowd control and
Mm-hmm.
and mind control. You could certainly charm animals to do things for you. So yeah, I think I think that would be entirely fair. And then your competitors just have to figure out a way to counteract that somehow.
Right.
Um, you know,
I
what I think is actually very. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
no. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I was going to say when we talk about the bard and their skills, what I'm interested to see how they handle this, and we talked a lot about this on Sunday with Theory Forge, was um, how they approach long term buffs. Is the bard's buff to your group only good while they're singing, or
Mm.
is it something that they sing a song and it persists for 15 minutes? And sort of how does that also apply to people outside of your group? Um,
Oh, we were
you know,
yes, because I was hearing you talk about that, and I completely agree with you. But go ahead, go ahead. I'm sorry.
yeah, like
I wasn't chatting that
coming
time.
from yeah, you look at World of Warcraft, you look at some of these older even EverQuest, like one of the things that people would do for fun or to make money is just to buff other I have a fortitude buff and you just run around putting it on new people. I'm curious to see if that is something that happens in Ashes of Creation. Like we've not really seen any example, I don't think, I could be wrong, of the ability to sort of buff people not in your group, like to just give them a buff. And what I
Oh
think is
yeah,
interesting with the bard is exactly that. Once the song quits, does your benefit quit, or is it something? And I could see you go either way. Um, if you inspired your group just because the song quit, doesn't mean there should immediately be uninspired. But I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how it goes.
yeah. I completely agree with you though. Like I don't care. I mean, I don't want every class to have like a 10 or 20-minute buff. But I think the two classes that actually come to mind is the cleric and the bard, because the cleric is a support healer, right? That's their function. And I think that bards are the main utility support, right? So it would make sense for those two classes to have some kind of a buff that you can give to your group, or to other, just even people
Mhm.
you're passing by, right? Like I used to love going down the crossroads and then a Tauren druid would just come by and give me thorns or give me Mark of the Wild and stuff like that, right? And I'm like, oh, thank you so much. It's just like a little thing that you can give out to people, and I think that's completely and utterly fine. My whole thing with the whole buffing thing is and this is something that I don't know if people are going to like in Ashes, but the one thing that always was so annoying to deal with when it came to WoW was being the buff police, right? Because, if you were in a raid and you didn't get the buff, but everyone else has it, and you're like, hey guys, can I have the, I don't have this buff or whatever. It's so stupid, dude. Like, I don't know if like it needs to be like, if you're in a party with that person, it can either just be a permanent aura that's just on you, and as soon as they leave the group, then it's gone. And then they can they can give you the buff like even outside of the party, but it's like a time limit, right? Like, let's say 10 or 20 minutes or whatever the case is, right? But I just hate being the buff police. You know what I mean? When there's a class that can give a buff to people, or if there's just something to where if you hit the button, then it doesn't go just on a single individual, it just goes to the whole raid, right? That way it's just everybody gets it all at once. There's no fuss, no mess, all that stuff. Ludaloo, dude, what's going on, man? Good to see you, buddy. Thank you so much for the raid. Go ahead, Vance. I'm sorry.
No, I mean, yeah. Sorry, that threw me off a little bit.
No, you're good.
Yeah, but the idea of buffing, I don't know, my heart, once again, this idea of tune twisting, which would say once the music stops playing, the buff falls off. Because that was the whole idea. In EverQuest, you had to cycle through, is usually about 4 songs or spells.
And just so I can ask,
persist. Yeah.
So what is tune twisting for someone like I've never even heard of that term? So I just want to, maybe there's other people like me that don't know what that means.
In my opinion, this is what made the EverQuest bard so badass. You, depending on the situation, you might have access to, you have to remember too, in EverQuest, you only had like, I think 8 spells that you could put on your bard any one time, have memorized.
Okay.
But out of those, you could, you would cast your, I don't know, Song of Health Regeneration. So that would be number 1. And then you could immediately follow that up with a attack buff, and then maybe an armor buff. And each time you do that, you're canceling out the first, the previous song, but it would persist for like 8 seconds or something. And so you could get this cycle where you were just kind of starting a new song and canceling out the other, and you would actually get 4 of those going at once. So you were sort of twisting all of these different.
So rotationally maintaining these micro buffs.
Right.
Got you.
Which I recognize modern day, a lot of people might find that tedious. At the time, it felt really good.
Yeah.
And EverQuest has actually gotten away from that. I think now they have what they call melodies. So you actually just put on a hotkey kind of, and it just goes. But it used to be you had to literally, you had to cycle through your literally a rotation. You had to cycle through your keys.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, like I think of like
I guess that's right.
Like an affliction.
Sorry, Warrior's saying.
Yeah.
Warriors. It's a good point. Warrior. I guess it is basically a rotation, like we do every day. I mean that's true.
Yeah, I mean, I think of like the affliction lock because as affliction lock you have to maintain like 4 to 5 debuffs like on a target, right? And so you're cycling through your rotation to basically know when this drops off, this one comes on. This is why I think the UI is such an important key to get right for a bard class, because especially if the only indicator is this one little thing on the top left part to know what 4 tune twists and the buff durations there are, like for you to be able to move that, make it bigger, expand it, separate it, or whatever you got to do for each individual bard person that wants to look at their buffs differently. I think that is so critical to put it in a position where you deem is the best and where like, oh crap, this particular tune's falling off, I got to do it in this way. Because it always sucks, especially in games like, in World of Warcraft, because they don't really have done add-ons, so that's why there is an add-ons community. But it would suck if you were playing Classic with no add-ons, because then you just have to look at the top left corner the entire time. They're like really, really tiny, And so if you are going to have this kind of a tune twisting bard build, like you need to have the UI like in place to facilitate that kind of a gameplay, and to get like rotationally done. Like honestly, like I don't know what I'm expecting. I'm literally leaving it to just my imagination and just kind of like blank slate. I'm not expecting anything, And I just want to see what Intrepid shows, because I think for people like you that have experienced the Bard from multiple games, other players or MMO players that have like their particular fondness for a particular support class, are all hoping and praying that it's like their support class from their favorite MMO. And
Yeah.
I don't have that. And so I know there's some people, like I said, they don't want it to be like these buff bots or these mana bots and stuff like that. But I the only way that I don't see that is like, well, then what are you doing? Like, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
when you say you don't want that, then what do you want in its place of that? Because that in itself is a gameplay style, and every class has its own gameplay style that you're doing, right? So like as an example for the fighter, you're basically using momentum and exert to, you know, that's the entire mechanic, the whole thing of you like popping off your cooldown, stuff like that, using them all over again, maintaining your momentum, draining it, going back again. The ranger is all about like your hunts and, you know, making sure you have the right hunt approached, the imbuing of your ammo, that whole thing. Like that's the gameplay style. So if you don't want, you know, the bard to be a buff bot, then what do you want?
Yeah.
Like, because I can't think of another alternate gameplay, to be honest, for the
No.
bard.
And it sounds like you shouldn't be support.
Yes, that's what I mean, right?
If you aren't wanting to be support, then don't be support.
Yeah.
I also want to point out tune twisting, that the sort of subtle difference between just a rotation, and I guess this maybe doesn't apply to everything, but there really was no downtime. Like you were literally like, you know, hitting 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, or you know, whatever your 1, 2, 3, 4 constant. You know, you didn't like hit a key, wait 4 seconds, hit another key. It was a constant refresh of songs. So,
Gotcha.
but
Well,
essentially a rotation.
I mean, how many abilities do you think they're going to showcase tomorrow?
Hopefully all of them. I don't know. Hopefully 15. I'll say 15.
Oh, we're
I mean, that sounds about right.
Yeah, no,
How
15
many?
sounds pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, what I would hope they'd actually do, what I would like to see is, because it is a support class, and what we really need to see is the sort of interaction with everyone else. I wish they would actually do this in a group setting, and actually not just have the bard sort of, oh, here's, let me push this key and you can see the notes around me, but actually have other people in your group, and where you could look at stats and you could see other stuff to just see what that influence was like.
Right.
And so,
Well, I think, again, that's like trying to showcase the tank by itself. Like, again, like with a fighter, you can just go and do a mob, right? Like, because it's just a DPS class. But if again, when they showed off the cleric, they showed it off with a group present. When they showed off the tank, they did it with a group present. I think if you're going to showcase a bard, like you can't do that by yourself. Like it has to be, in my opinion, with a group present, because if there are certain songs that influence, like if there's all these abilities that all influence the group and you don't have a group, it's not much of a showcase to me. You know what I mean? So
no.
I don't think Steven and I don't think Intrepid would showcase the bard in that kind of fashion. I think they would definitely do within a group. I know some people say, please run a dungeon. Like, hell, dude, I would love to see like even a small part. Hell, go back to like where they were doing the story chapter narrative, when they did like the blood rain from the Tower of Carfin, and just go back there. Go back to the entrance of the Tower of Carfin and let's see that again. I don't care. Like, I think that'd be really cool. Or just show us like the very beginning of the Tower of Carfin, you know, that first foundational level, right? Because Steven said that was going to be 6 levels. Just show us that. Like, I think you don't even have to show us a boss. Just show us like the cannon fodder in there, show how it all works or whatever. I think that'd be totally fine. But I think people would be a little disappointed if it was just another area of the Riverlands that had a lot of mobs in. So
yeah,
we shall see.
And I have no insider knowledge, but I hope they showcase it in a way that makes sense. So.
Yes. Yeah. No, and I think they will. I mean, again, usually Intrepid's very I feel like I'm really glad that the tank showcase did happen, because I think that made them really realize like how important these, especially these class showcases are. And I think ever since the tank, every showcase they've done has been really good. Like I don't think, you know, that was their one misstep, and after that, bangers. Like all the classes have been really, really good. The second cleric showcase I thought was way better than the first one. But let's be honest, the first cleric showcase was before the tank, right? Because it was like the whole when they showed
That's
off the
true.
constellation and stuff like that. So I think every Clash showcase after Tank has just been, I think they found their rhythm. I think they found their way of how to showcase these classes efficiently, and something that actually looks good and feels good from our perspective as a viewer, like has been
Hmm.
really, really good. But so outside, we talked about Alpha 2 release date. We talked about the Bard showcase. Like, what do you think of character creator? And this is something you, God dang it, man. This is probably something you can't talk about because you're in freaking PI. But like, okay, if you, I don't even know if you can even do this, dude.
I'll throw it out there. We'll see.
When do you think, Phantom, of when this character creator might come out? I mean, hell, I've always said August. I think August could actually. I think they announce it this showcase. I think they'll announce it, but I don't think they'll give it to us tomorrow. But I think they will announce it and say sometime this month in August you will have your hands on the character creator. Or do you think that's too soon?
Um, I will say that they have consistently told us we would get it before Alpha 2,
Right.
right? So I would expect that to be true. But I would also probably think it would be closer to Alpha 2 than now, would be my guess. So um
Okay.
I don't know if I can say more, but I don't think it's something you're gonna have a month to play with prior to Alpha 2. I could be wrong. I don't know. But
Well, that's kind of sad. I was honestly hoping we would get it for at least 2 months. Like, because I figured they've been working on it for as long as they have. And if they, let's say if they're like, hey, we'll let you just play with the humans, right? Like, let's say the human architecture or the customization is as far as long as it can. I would even settle with like a build that only had the Kalar, and that's it. There's no Renkai, there's no other classes, there's no Pyre, it's just Kalar. But I think giving just something for people, like even content creators like ourselves, to go in and just, let's see if we can try to make my face, or let's see if we can go try to make Steven's face, or our favorite streamer's face, or whatever, right? Like, I think that'd be really cool. And I think it would just give people also just a taste of where the character creator came, like where it was, which again, great showcase when they showed it, but even all of the steps that it's gotten to from that point, right? Like all of the little things, you know, because I know there was like many hairstyles they still wanted to add or whatever, and we've seen a lot of the hairstyles, like a lot of the Viking hairstyles they did with the braids and stuff. Dude, looks badass. Like, and again, these are all Kalar human stuff. So I guess for me and my kind of copium, like I still would hope they would give it to us in the month of August, but I think now, to your point, we might get it at the late part of August. So I don't know. I mean, again, I'm not trying to infer anything, but I think the more you talk, the more I realize, yeah, you're probably right, because I think if they were to give it to us early, it'd probably be like 3 weeks early. And so if that's the case, then the last week of September, we would have our hands on the character creator by like first week September, last week potentially of August, which makes me sad.
yeah.
Which
I
makes
mean,
me
yeah. I think the most I can go is if they still say it's before Alpha 2, then it will be before Alpha 2. So anytime from now to then. Um, I actually think it should be used as a marketing tool. You know, they're trying to do this whole
Oh,
alpha key thing,
absolutely.
but I would love to see it get to a point where, and maybe this is on release or later, but you know, you don't own the game, but you actually can download that for free.
Mhm.
You know, and the idea being you invest so much time creating these characters to where you connect to them.
Right.
Intrepid saves that to their server, and that becomes sort of an enticing, okay, I actually want to play the character, so now I'm going to go ahead and spend money on the game to get um, monthly access. I think that would just be an incredibly smart way to use it. Just letting the character creator be open to everyone eventually.
Right. Honestly, I think it'd be and I don't know if they can do this, but I think if they can integrate the character creator on the website, like if you can go to ashthecreation.com and actually play with the character creator on the website, like that would
Yeah.
be huge, because then anybody, like they don't have to download any launchers. There's no fuss. There's no download. You just go to the website and it works. Like, I don't know if that's even possible. I don't know, but man, that would
Yeah.
be, that would be really, really, really huge. But again, depending on how many assets there are and stuff like that, it probably it could not function in
Yeah.
that way. So I don't know. I'm not
Yeah.
a web supporter person.
But
So
yeah, but if you can get non customers tied to a character that they've created for free, I think that
yes.
just increases the odds that they're going to actually then go ahead and pay for your game. So I think that could be just an incredibly good marketing tool eventually. So
Yeah. No, for sure, for sure. And so I guess like there's really not much to talk about with the character creator. I mean, because it's like, oh no, he got me so disappointed, Phantom. Jesus, I have to move on from that.
I don't know. I don't know. We'll see what happens tomorrow.
I know. We'll see.
Steve,
We'll
they
see.
like surprises. I think if anything, you'll get an Alpha 2 date, and that will help you better understand kind of where
Well,
these things sit.
yeah. Well, not me. Like I know it's going to be the last week of the last week of September.
Well, everyone.
Like
So,
everyone else can finally like stop with this whole idea of late August. Like again, like it's not late August, guys. Please, like I think the other thing too. I think it's setting proper expectations with the date, right? I think that's the biggest thing. Is just setting down, getting back people to reality. Because I think a lot of people, and I was talking about this earlier on my stream. I think people are flying way too close to the sun, and I think they're going to crash down and it's going to hurt, because I think there's just, again, they're trying to think that, oh, Intrepid's further along than what they are. Guys, you don't understand. Like, it's going to be this, it's going to be that. And it's just like, well, no, like, guys, this is so important. This is, you have no idea how critically important this Alpha 2 date and launch is for this company. Like, as much as I want to say don't hype it, it's not a big thing. Like, it is. Like, it is, because it's going to be one of those things that's really going to set the pace forward for Intrepid and for Ashes of Creation and for our MMO community at large. Because, again, every time that we've ever had these kinds of tests or whatever, like, look at how hard PAX Day felt. Like, oh my God. There was this huge subsection of people that were so hyped for the game. The alpha came out. It was like January or whatever. People played it and they're like, dude, okay, this is basically just a building simulator. So you had people that were expecting more MMO elements, got greatly disappointed, and they're like, oh, maybe by the next test. And then the next test happened, severely, just a lot of guilds just like kind of not fell apart, but they're just like, this is not what we thought this game was, right? Like, again, it's fun to build, but there's way more to an MMO than just building towns, right?
yeah.
I want to say too, Wicked Hijinks and Facade NZ, thank you so much for the follows. Thank you, and welcome. But yeah, there's just so much more to an MMO than that, right? And I think with all of the foundational systems that we've talked about, that we know for Ashes of Creation, like, there is, I think, going to be quite a lot that they're going to do for the start of Alpha 2. And I'm going to be making a video of this, I don't know if it's going to be soon, but it's going to be in August for sure, as to like all the things that I think will be in the Alpha 2 and how important all that is and setting that foundation is. Because, again, like, there's going to be a lot to test. There's going to be a lot to go by. And even, what it seems like from all of the feedback that y'all did for the Node Wars, I mean, there was certain content creators or certain people in PI when they were talking about, like, amongst yourselves, that y'all were leaving a lot of feedback on those Node Wars. And just like you said, like, very transformative from test 1 to test 6, right? Oh, yeah. And that was a singular system. I think just extrapolating that to all of the systems in Ashes of Creation, like, it's going to, hopefully we can shape this game up to be like the best MMO we can possibly make MMOs great again, kind of thing.
Yeah. I think that will happen. Yeah, I mean, it's been so long. Yes, I think almost regardless of what they do, it's going to be a big day. Everyone's going to be amazed to see Alpha 2. What's it like? I assume big streamers will pick up on it. At the same time, again, I think the biggest message I could give is it's an alpha, and so set your expectations correctly. And it was mentioned in chat that they are supposed to also release a list of sort of what the Alpha 2 entry criteria is. Don't know when that will be released. Again, I think that will help people understand. I actually think Intrepid should just take the approach of sending the message they have been. This is an alpha. It's bugs. Um, I did a video again on what to expect, and you look through all of the recent videos. All of a sudden, the word bug shows up a lot.
Yeah.
They've even started showing visual bugs on their showcases, which is not something they did 2 years ago.
Right.
So I think you see that messaging. Hey, this is an alpha, so we want you to have correct expectations. And I honestly
Right.
think that's the best approach to take. I think you look at PAX Day, they did not take that approach, and so they set the
Nope.
bar somewhere different than what they actually were at, and that made players upset. Obviously, like, I just spent money on this. It's nothing like I thought it would be. Early access, it should be further along. So I think the messaging of this is a true alpha, there's going to be bugs, is the right direction. So that way, if players do feel a little bit underwhelmed or not completely to their expectations, it's their expectations. Intrepid can come back and say, well, no, 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 we told you this was an alpha. So I think that is the correct messaging rather than building up hype. And I think that's part of why we've not seen a lot of hype being built. It's obviously been mentioned in streams, but you've not seen big video packages or stuff like that about the Alpha 2. Maybe we see that as it gets closer. I don't know, but so I also, the question of like World of Warcraft's expansion being around the same time, Throne of Liberty being around the same time. I personally think that's fine.
Same.
This is a long haul alpha. It's going to take a while. It's going to be around a while. So I think having these external distractions for people to go to is actually going to be helpful for them.
Yes, and I think that's gonna be quite good, because then like certain things can be drowned out by other narratives, right? Like if Throne of Liberty comes out and it's like a complete flop, or the game is poor, then all the videos, because again, YouTube is always cranked by negative criticism, right? Like everybody wants to watch the negative video. This is why I think New World did gangbusters on a release, because it was just, there's so much negativity at the launch of that game, which is what made Josh Drives Hayes video just go viral basically, and all these different criticisms, stuff like that. So if there's like criticisms of like The War Within, which is like a huge IP from World of Warcraft, and then you have another major IP from what is it, Nexon or next from Throne of Liberty, or what's the
sorry, what?
The Throne of Liberty is like a
NCSoft.
Thank you. I always forget that. NCSoft. This is their major thing, and again, they've worked on this game for like what, 12 years.
Mm-hmm.
So this is why they've taken the approach of now their like worldwide launch or whatever, right? And again, their Korean launch was completely botched, like terrible, completely terrible. So there's a lot hinging on this worldwide release for them. So I think there's going to be a lot of stuff in a vacuum, and I think it'd be honestly the perfect time to go across, because again, if you have all the stuff or the potential debacles of Throne of Liberty and mix in some stuff maybe with maybe some hype, because I'm not saying that it's going to be a bad thing with The War Within. I mean, it looks fine. It looks like a fine expansion, but if you can have that kind of blended in, like, and even if there are some issues for Ashes of Creation at the launch, like it could be completely outfaded by like all the stuff that Throne of Liberty is facing. You know what I mean? So I think it's like you said. I think it's the perfect time to release.
And not even negative. I mean, even if Throne of Liberty comes out as a great game, the War Within is great expansion, just having these other outlets, I think, is just very helpful for them, for people to go to, so that they're not stuck, looking at Ashes for 2 months and waiting on content and waiting on this, waiting on that, and just getting increasingly frustrated. I think having these other outlets will be good.
The other thing I want to talk about for a little bit is the new information we basically got from this live stream. I didn't really have talked about it with you, but the Alpha 2 keys, like we got, like they're coming back, like not pre-order packets, but just the keys themselves.
Yeah.
Been a lot of talk. I know Diggs was saying he wants the Alpha 2 key to be anywhere between $100 to $125. Like, I'm curious, like, where do you sit when it comes to the price of just the Alpha 2 key by itself?
That's an interesting question. I actually did a video on this too. So I did a
I
lot of
know. I
research
saw
into
the
sort of the
video.
history of it. Um, if you go strictly by what the Alpha Key price would have been in a package,
Hmm.
the Voyager or the Voyager package, it would have been, I think it was like, was it
$20.
$20?
Yep.
You know, it's a hard thing to gauge because a lot of the major MMOs didn't charge. So when you look at things like Final Fantasy, Guild Wars 2, World of Warcraft, all of these games, they didn't. They didn't. So you almost have to look out at almost other genres outside of the MMORPG. It is just a key. So, in that sense, my thought is somewhere $50 to $75. I think when I say that, the people that already have bought packages get upset. They say, "Well, I spent $250.
No, there's Fupa.
Why are they getting it for $50?" Um, but that package contained a whole lot of other stuff,
Right.
and this is just an alpha key. That is what you are getting. So, um, which I will point out in the research that I did, when you go back through the history of packages like that have been offered in various games, 250 was actually pretty pricey. You really don't see
Absolutely.
any other game that came close to that. I think Arcade was 150, and that was probably on the top end of packages historically.
Mhm.
Um, so I don't know. Who knows? I don't worry about cost so much. I do think you obviously don't want it to be super low because I think you already have a lot of people in. So I think you're probably wanting to get quality testers. Um, at the end of the day, though, it's just money. So I don't know. Um, I'm more interested, honestly, in. I am surprised at it opening up so soon. Um, I thought it would be a while. I'm more interested in the win.
Well,
Um,
that was the other thing people were debating too, is that there's actually, I thought it was a small subset, but it's actually, I think it's a quite large amount of people that want these keys to happen after
mhm.
Alpha 2 access. So like, let's say if, you know, September 24th is the date, right? Let's just say for argument's sake, they want the keys to be made available like at the end of October, right? So like, do you agree that the people who got the original pre-order pack should have first dibs to the start of alpha, and the lemmings can come in like a month or even
Yeah.
2 months later? Like, I think a month is, I think, fine. Like a month later to me is fine. Like, I kind of don't care either way, is my personal position. I don't care if they come
Mhm.
in along with us day one of the alpha 2 or if they come in 30 days later, because I think traditionally a month is where usually people's attention spans tend to wean off, right? If
Yeah.
they're going hard into a game, especially in a game that's not even meant to be played, quote unquote, and there isn't going to be infinite content you can do at the start of Alpha 2, is all sort of finite in a sense. And again, you can only care about a singular aspect of what you want to do or test. And then once you do that for a couple of days or a week or two, you could be over it and you're like, there's nothing more I want to do in this game. I'm just going to put it up. So, like, what is your take on that? Should it be a day one thing for those new people, or should they wait a month or even 2 months?
So I would rather them wait, but not for the reasons of existing package holders getting in first. I can see that argument. We invested, not really, but we invested early. We should get access early.
I'm an early
My
adopter,
thing,
fandom.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I'll fight with anyone. I'll go back to Kickstarter. So backer number three.
That's right.
Um, my thing is just more servers. Like, apparently they feel good in their testing, and they said this, that they can open keys again, but you've really not had those players in. And so my thought is why not just actually make sure your servers can handle it first,
Yes, a
rather than
hundred
the
percent.
possibility rather than the possibility of it not, and now you've just sold 30, 40, 50,000 keys to people that can't really get in for. I think that would be
Yes.
messy. But I can also see the other side where if you wait a month, what if Alpha 2 launch isn't good? and there's a lot of negative thoughts. Well, now you've lost out on those people that would have purchased beforehand, probably won't purchase after. Um, or even if it's a decent launch, if it's existed for a month and there's 100,000 videos out there and people are kind of, played their way through, does the interest drop from those people? So I can kind of see both sides. My thing is just, again, the sort of server experience is where my question comes in. I could honestly care less if someone joined me um, that bought a key, 5 years later than me. It doesn't bother me personally.
I was gonna say, Krongus, dude, thank you so much for the sub, dude. I really appreciate it. Thank you, thank you. And honestly, Phantom, that's like a excellent point you brought up. Like, the fact is that if their servers are pooping its pants the first couple of days, and if they do, like, if those people then bought like a key that is $70, $80, $100, or however much the key is going to be, and then we have like a Wayfinder situation. You were there for Wayfinder, weren't you?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
If we get into a Wayfinder situation, that doesn't look good. Not to us, the people, the pre-adopters, and also not to the people who literally just bought into that $80, $70, or $100 key. It just doesn't look good at all. And it took Wayfinder way more than a week to figure out its server issues.
Yeah.
And so it's, I would rather the faith be questioned from the early adopters than the faith be questioned by potentially new customers that have not even been here. Does that make sense? Yeah. Like we all know, like, again, a lot of the people that have pre-ordered and did all that stuff, will there be people that be upset if we have server issues? Absolutely. But because we've been here for the long haul, like, we all kind of know, hey, this is a huge deal. This is them launching this persistent test. It's going to take potentially years for us to finish. Like, we'll have more grace than brand new people that don't have any emotional connection to this property. And so that, to me, I think speaks volumes. And so I personally would not even allow the buying of those keys until, like, you get all of the, making sure the server architecture is 100% solid. Like, that's what I would do personally. So yes, I would probably make them wait.
Because the other part to this, I think back to, I don't know if you heard that. That was some loud ass thunder. The other thing is, again, this release of their Alpha 2 criteria, sort of what will be an Alpha 2. I also think that should come before they sell keys. We had a kind of similar situation, I guess, with Chronicles of Illyria. They did a sell. They sold a bunch of stuff, and then afterwards things folded. So you had all these people that spent money, and then literally like 2 weeks later, like, the rug got pulled out from under them. So I also think that it should be a scenario where your Alpha 2 key people that buy the keys should also have an idea of what they're actually getting into to start with. So I would definitely put the key sales after the release of the what's in Alpha 2 document. So
yeah, I think I just don't want the faith to be shaken from these new people. Like, I want those people to be onlookers onto watching these major streamers go into the game. Again, that's going to be, like I said, there is going to be a lot of eyes on this project, regardless of when it launches. Like, even if it's alongside the War Within, even if it coincides with the Throne of Liberty launch, there's going to be many, many people, high profile streamers, that are going to be playing Ashes of Creation. And it's all going to be so hingent on, like I said, that experience, the server infrastructure, the queue times, and the action, or the combat. Those three things play such a main role into potential brand new customers that can go in and be like, I'll spend $75 to get this key. It looks like a lot of fun. My favorite streamer's playing it. He's having a great time. He was only in queue for like, oh, we didn't even talk about that. How long? Because you said that queue times are an issue. And so I was going to ask you this question. I completely forgot about it. In your opinion, how long should a queue time be in this day and age, in 2024? Like, if you're going to be playing this MMO, and let's say there's going to be 200,000 people all wanting to play this MMO along with you, what is an acceptable queue time for you, Phantom?
1 trillion years. No, it's Vlhadus. I also don't think 2 to 3 hours. I actually, in a modern day where time is money and time is hard to find, in my mind, 15 to 30 minutes. I think if you're going an hour or longer, especially if you get to a point where it's so long, someone goes out and decides to do something else. I'm going to go do laundry, and then they come back and they've missed it, and they have to go back to the end in the end of the queue again.
Oof.
Um, I 15 to 30 minutes is sort of my max. I mean, you mentioned Wayfinder. You were there for that. I mean, there was what, like 10-hour queues, 12-hour queues.
It was really bad.
Um,
It was so
yeah,
bad.
I mean, what are you paying for at that point? Like, you can't even, you're not even getting into tests. Like, even if you want to test, like, you can't get in.
Yeah.
And then what do you do if the server crashes, which very possibly could happen during an alpha, and you have to go back into the queue again? So I think 15 to 30 minutes would make sense for me.
Honestly, this is what I would do. Like, I guess I'm more forgiving. Like, I think an hour to 2 hours is acceptable. And the reason why I say that is because, like, I guess you said everybody treats their time differently. Some people think 20 minutes is the most I'll wait or whatever. But the fact remains, as the data shows otherwise, right, is that there was insanely long queue times for New World for certain servers. And yet still people played that game, even along with all of the bugs, the dupes, the glitches, just all the problems with that game. And it still did okay. I know in a perfect world, we would want 20 minutes or, hell, I'd want to go in instantly, right? We think of 2024, we should have the technology just to go in the damn game, right? Like, why? Like, I understand, like, again, there's certain ways to go about it, and depending on how the game is built and structured, right? There's going to be 5 starting areas that are going to be at the start of the launch in Ashes of Creation, but that won't be the case in the launch of Alpha 2, right? We'll be lucky to even have 5 biomes to play with at the start of Alpha 2. And I think that's more hopium in that sense. But I hope that they at least spawn people in different sectors, especially to enable the dynamic gridding to offset the load that just, again, I think static location spawn queues or whatever, right? Like if you go into Durotar as an orc, you spawn, everybody that makes an orc spawns in the same exact spot. I think that is a poor way to construct a game now. And especially if you're going to be enabling, dang, Phantom, I did hear that. Is it thundering? Like, is it?
Thunder. Yeah.
Jesus. Talk about the calm before the storm. Jesus. Phantom's making it be a reality over there. But no, yeah, like I think you need to be able to stagger it out, or even do something like New World where, and I don't know how Ashes of Creation can technically do that, because when you go through the portal, like everyone's coming out through the portal, right? So it is kind of a static location that people are coming from. So I don't know if that's something Ashes can do, but golly, I would definitely try to find a way to do it to where that is a possibility for you to be at least near the portal, right? So you're not coming directly from the portal, but you basically spawn around the portal. Like, that's what I would try to remedy in that sense, to basically take a part of the dynamic gridding part of it. Because again, I think if they can make it into a square block and you have 4 different quadrants to work off of instead of just one, if it's just one, that's going to be really bad, because that's going to lead to that particular cell or that server to crash, because again, only so many people can go in there, or they have to trickle feed people in until they get away from that grid. And again, that's going to lead to these really extended queue times. So the more blocks that they enable for people to come out of, the faster queues, just faster way people can play the game. But it astonishes me that we still are in this day and age and we have not figured out the queue situation. You know what I mean? Or companies have not figured it out. It just boggles my brain, because it's such an important part of a launch, right? I mean, no one wants to be at a queue boss. But honestly, oh my God, I would love, and I know Intrepid is always so like innovative and bright, make a freaking queue game. like do like some kind of Galaga or some kind of
Yeah.
a 2D simple like Pong game. I honestly feel like if a company were to actually give you a game to play while you're in queue, would go such a long way. Like
Yeah.
I really do. Like it would be a really stupid thing, but golly, man, it would make people like put like a little score system in it. Hell, put Snake in. I don't care. But as long as you give something for people to do, like I think that would be really cool. So
No, that actually sounds really good. They at one time talked about, phone app kind of connectivity. So even stuff like
mhm.
that. So even like chat, like if you could have it just open chat during your queue, like talking to other people in the queue or talking to people that are in the game but in your guild,
Right.
um, or a game. Like also would think, think of things like crafting, harvesting, fishing, but this is all going to be so different from what we're used to. I don't know that you could like let someone just like do some sort of harvesting mini game or crafting mini game
Oh, dude, Peaver
while they're
Pirate
waiting.
came up. Dude, you can do like a quiz. You can just put like certain like things from ashes and just like, have multiple choice. Like, I don't care. Like, I think if you were just to put in something, like instead of just number, make it go down faster, right? Like if you just actually do something in that kind of a way, I think would go a long way, because then you would have like these high profile streamers be playing this really, stupid little game. And then
Yeah.
the chat will love it. The streamer actually has something to do instead of just talking for 2 hours. If the queue's 2 hours, right? They actually have some form of a thing to do. You know what I mean? While they're waiting in
Yeah.
queue. And
That's a great idea.
I think it would actually go a very, very long way. Yeah, I don't know if there's anything else I really wanted to talk about. I mean, we discussed a lot, dude. We kind of did a 1v1 in a sense, but we were just talking. We were just talking. Is there anything that you want to talk about?
There was something mentioned about the Bard a while back that I wanted to kind of comment on in the chat, and there was a comment about whether instrument types or instrument quality should affect what the strength of a song, or if I'm playing this level of flute, I can only heal the group for 10 health points every 5 seconds. But if I'm playing a much better quality violin, now all of a sudden it's 20. I've doubled. I actually hope they do something like that. I would like to see qualities of instruments matter, and instruments themselves. One of the things I actually really liked about New World is their music system and the different instruments and the different ways to play. I actually think that was, for all of New World's flaws, I think their music system was done very well, especially in how they introduced all the different instruments and how they, what you could do with it. So I hopefully we will see that, where the instrument does matter and the instrument quality matters as well. So
I don't know if I can understand on the paper doll if bards had their own kind of specific paper doll with like an instrument like slot, and there's like maybe crafters that can craft like different quality instruments for the bard. I wouldn't mind that in a sense. Again, this is why I don't want to have any kind of preconceived notions, because it's like I just want to see like what it is they do. But we do know that it's the people were asking for those instruments to be weapons, and they're not going to be weapons. Like that's I don't know if I think they'll classify them just as instruments, right? So you'll have your weapons, but I think if they do anything, it'll be just an additional slot on the paper doll that only bards have, that you can put an instrument in that. And you can, like, again, I kind of want races to play a role into instruments as well. Not a big role, but basically what I mean is like each main race, like there's basically 4 main races that spawn into 2 other races. Like I would love if each main race like started off with a particular weapon. Like you have, let's say the elves, right? They spawn with a lute. You have the Renkai, the Vec and the Renkai spawn with a guitar. And then you have like the dwarves spawn with drums, right? Like I think, and again, it's just at this at a starting area. And then of course, if you want to wear drums as a Renkai, you can always get the drum instrument and equip it on there later. But I think it'd be really cool to have each race have a particular instrument at the start. I think it just add that little bit of extra. Maybe not the start of Alpha 2, but I'm talking like the start of the launch of Ashes of Creation.
Yeah, I think that would be great. It makes sense too. Everybody's going to have a little bit different background. So, but yeah, the weapons, instruments as weapons people, um, we just remind them that Steven has already announced the weapons for Alpha 2, and there were
He
no
did.
instruments on them. So
Exactly.
that should tell you.
Yeah,
So.
yeah. Well, Phantom, I think we did a pretty damn good job. I think like a lot of us here, we're just so excited for tomorrow. And I think tomorrow is going to feel like Christmas for a lot of us. I really hope that this Bard showcase, because I know there's a lot of people that don't even care about the Bard. They're just like, give me the date. That's all I care about. Just want to know the date. And so like I've been telling my chat for a long time, it's going to be in September, 100%. I'm hoping the earlier the better. I hope I'm wrong. Like I keep saying end of September, but man, if they say it's the first week of September, hell yes. The quicker I can get this game in my hands, the better. But I think just more realistically, I think they're going to try to squeeze out as much time from quarter 3 as humanly possible. So I think it'd be such a funny thing if they're like, yeah, guys, September 30th. Yay. There's your date. And it's like the last possible date of the month. But, I don't know. It's going to be exciting. Tomorrow's going to be, everybody's going to be streaming. Are you going to be streaming at all?
No, tomorrow? I'll be at work. So
you'll be at work.
Don't tell anybody, but I'll be watching it at work. So
okay. I won't say anything. But dude, Phantom, thank you so much for coming on and just hanging out. It's very much impromptu like this. I literally just reached out to my boy Phantom and I said, hey dude, are you doing anything? Are you busy? And he's like, not really, man. What's going on? So I just decided to come on. All right, man. Well, thank you guys so much. Phantom, where can people find you and your posse, the Theory Forge people?
So Theory Forge, we do the Ashen Forge Sundays, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. I've also started doing some more streaming throughout the week when I can. We're on YouTube. Everything basically at Theory Forge.
Yeah. Can I hold on? Is it? Let me shout out. I've been trying to use this shout out feature. Is that it? Just Theory Forge?
Yep. That would be our channel.
Yay. All right. So that's it, guys, right there. They're always going live at, what is it? 8 p.m. Central time or 7 p.m. Central time?
8 Central.
8 Central. Yeah. 8 Central.
Yeah.
Guys, is there anybody in the Ashes category? I think I saw, Golden Feather. Are they streaming?
They went live. I don't see. Yeah, they're there.
Yep. I see Golden Feather there. Let's go ahead and raid over to them. And guys, again, thank y'all so much. Again, super impromptu stream. I'm really excited. I just wanted to talk to somebody. My boy Phantom came on. Yeah. We talked. If you're not following my stream, of course, just do like Fo did and hit that follow button on Twitch. If you're watching on YouTube, don't be afraid to subscribe. You'll always stay up to date anytime when I go randomly live like the way I do. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we will see you guys on the next one for tomorrow. I will be live tomorrow. I think at 12 noon is when I'm planning to go live tomorrow. So see you guys for tomorrow. Stay safe, guys.
It's all about who you're targeting at the moment.